There we go. All right. I believe this means we are live. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, tech fans of all shapes and sorts and sizes and persuasions, welcome to another episode of the Monday Morning Tech Chat Show on the SGGQA podcast channel. I'm Juan Carlos Bagnell, aka Some Gadget Guy, the SGG of this terribly named podcast series. But the QA is the awesome part. The QA is the important part, obviously standing for question and answers. We like to kick off our week. We like to get our tech week started right. Get a little interactive conversation on some news stories. Maybe some news broke over the weekend. Maybe we're launching headlong into CES, and I'm real sad that yet another year with everything that's been kind of going on in my personal life. This was another year I had to sit out CES, so I'm just watching all my friends from afar, super jelly, and I'm hoping they're partying up extra hard to compensate for my lack of partying in Vegas. But I'm so glad to be joining you all on this stream. Already seeing some great faces, some great names, some great user handles in the chat. We got some Barry Johnson, some Simon Says Hypno, Josh W. We got Kapakash, Michael C, Travis R, good times. John Gao, David Lockwood. We got Malik, Tangential Tesseract, Jojo the Techie, Al Sabakli. Hey Al, what's up? And I'm so sorry, I'm gonna mispronounce your names. Skrizekawikazol. I'm so sorry, but thank you for joining. We got Jojo the Techie, Control Alt Clay. We got Darcy, H2O Taku, Kib48, Bot. What is up, Bot? And I think we're gonna have a really fun show. I'm gonna put it out there. I'm feeling some good energy. I'm feeling some good vibes. This is the first podcast of 2025. Oh my gosh, y'all! I haven't seen any of y'all since last year. It is my favorite joke. I hit my neighbor with that one, and he gave me full on like shoulder slump, cringe, sigh, dad joke. Yeah, I get it. But we're still in that, like, literally in the first week of 2025, where I feel it's still appropriate to wish someone a happy new year. I want to throw this out at the top of the podcast before we get into some housekeeping. What date on the calendar is it weird that you would wish someone a happy new year? Like, for example, if I'm doing a production gig and maybe I run into someone end of January, is that too late? Like, I hadn't had a chance to talk to you before. This is now like my first seeing you in the new year. I could wish you a happy new year. It's still January. Is January still weird? Like, let's say, I think for me, as soon as you get into February, then it's weird. Because if like I haven't seen you in the first month of 2025, then wishing someone a happy new year is kind of odd. See, like Kapakash is beat me to it, but yeah, it seems to agree. Kapakash says February 1st, too late. Control of Clay is cutting it even quicker. Look at this. After the 10th, the year is no longer new. It's like driving a car off the lot and you immediately lose like 30% of the car's value. By January 10th, it's all old news. This is an old year. You've got 350 more days to go of an old, tired, busted year after January 10th. So tangential tesseract, I kind of feel that way. My wife and I were talking about this a little while back. Just like, when does it start to get weird? Because you still want to like, hey, acknowledging this is the first time I'm seeing you in a new calendar year. I think January. I think January just is fair game. And then if it's like the end of January, you can make an extra point out of like, oh my gosh, I just realized this is the first time I've seen you in the new. Oh, happy New Year! You can kind of play it, right? By the time you get to February, I think all bets are off. JoJo is wide open here. There's no clear statute of limitations on this. You make it to May. It's the first time you see someone in 2025. All bets are off. Just go for it. Acknowledge it. Firm handshake, direct eye contact, and I think they'll respect you for it. Michael C., I think you can get away until Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Okay, right on. H2 Otaku, I believe you can greet people Happy New Year whenever you first see them during the year, as long as it isn't December 31st, by which you are too early instead of too late. I love it. I love it. Simon says Hypno says mid January and then Tangential Tesseract. It is weird if you don't say it until the second time you see someone in January. Hey, Happy New Year. Oh, right, we hung out yesterday. Well, folks, I'm trying to get back into the flow of things. The last couple weeks were very challenging weeks for my family, and there's still a lot of stuff happening, still a lot of things going on, and it's kind of getting back into the flow. My daughter's back in school today. We had a lovely holiday, getting to spend some time together as family. She had lots of softball going on. She did a skills assessment in softball over the weekend, and it's just wild. Like we throw out quippy little phrases like, "Oh, the days are long, but the years are short," and you kind of lose sight of just like, wow, like literally every time she goes to a practice, she's refining this or she's improving that. And so I had video from her very first skills assessment for the beginning of spring season last year, and just watching what she could do this year was incredible. Like putting those two videos side by side, they're completely different kids, and it's again, I'm a little overly sentimental because it's just the time of year for that kind of sentimentality anyway. But being able to hold on to that and kind of keep that in perspective, like, oh no, she didn't make this play in this one game. I think she's better than that. She could totally do it, and yet losing perspective of just like, oh my gosh, like year over year, this athleticism is absolutely incredible. So that was a really rambling way of getting into the fact like I'm trying to get my patter back. There's a pattern. I want to get the show back on sort of the structure we're going to do. I don't have a lot of housekeeping just because I really did need to unplug a bit during the holidays. I've been doing a lot of prep. So there's like a major phone announcement that's happening tomorrow. I'm doing a lot of prep for that. Finally finished. Oh, do I even have it up here? I have to be careful because there are other things that aren't launching tomorrow that I can't show on camera just yet. Oh, good. Okay. So I finally finished. Finally finished. When so many good phones come out all at the same time, it's really difficult to give each one the proper focus it deserves. So like these two phones here on my table, I've had them for a little while. I've got the iQOO 13, I've got the Oppo Find X8 Pro. I feel now, because we've gotten a couple big updates for both, I feel now is the appropriate time to start the process of collecting those more consistent camera samples and tests that I like to show in my camera deep dives. This is tricky because these phones have been out for a little while, but also I don't want to just rush straight in. So I do a lot of like nighttime photography, right? I walk around a really dark suburban neighborhood out here. We're not rural, but we got like horse trails and stuff like that. And there are sometimes it's like, hey, if I want to test low light photography, it gets dark. But if I take 5 phones and go hike, I don't know that I'm really getting the best out of every phone. It's kind of a head trip to me how much we still put on. I don't even know if I'll be able to find it really quickly. It's still a head trip to me how much we put on like this abbreviated conversation trying to streamline the review process. And I understand why. It's faster, it's arguably less work, but it's things like, I'll put 2 phones in clamps. I'll put 2 phones in mounts side by side. I do not believe you're getting the best photo sample of each phone. So you got 2 phones side by side. The differences in angle, in approach, in what that field of view looks like. The only thing you're really testing is the laziest, non-compositional kind of photography. You don't care what you're trying to capture on the phone, and I think that's reflected in one phone often being the one you compose with, and the other phone is the one that you just snap the shutter button next to it. Even in that kind of scenario, that little difference of keeping phones side by side to try and streamline the process, and I don't think this is conscious. I think people who do the side by side are really doing it just for the speed, the ease of use, but you're unconsciously, that's what I'm trying to say. You're unconsciously kind of picking a winner And there will be a slightly better photo from one phone than the other. The other phone is just kind of a tacked on also ran. I did this on the Discord a while back. I don't even know if I'll be able to find it. But we were traveling for the holidays, and someone was saying like, "Hey, I really want to see more." Someone was requesting that they wanted to see more camera comparisons, and I philosophically lock up on stuff like this because I shoot really candid. I really love catching moments in action. Um, you can't compare output from two phones for candid shots. You can't take a photo as someone's going in for a hug, quickly drop that phone, pick up another phone, and take a photo of that same hug in that same, like, you know what I mean? It's about capturing a moment. So if everything is like kind of perfectly posed, that is a different kind of photography. I think that's why pixels do so well in a lot of these kinds of comparisons and tests, because it's got to be a static image. So it's the difference between like you've got that family member who always wants everyone to stop what they're doing in the middle of a get together. Okay, everybody, look at the camera, smile here. And everyone kind of holds and tries to put their best face forward. I don't do that at all. I'm the person across the living room who sees like my daughter playing Legos with one of my cousins, and I go like, okay, this is a moment. I want to capture this moment. And I feel like that's part of it that we keep losing the conversation on. I don't think I can find it. This is again, it was a while back on the oh, okay, wait, no. Here it is. Okay, let me see if I can do this. So that we can see it on screen. Sorry, apologies to anyone who's catching the audio version of this on replay, because this I'll try to describe what we're doing here. So I've got someone was saying I should try to do more photo comparisons. So I've got these two images. Literally while I was at an airport, I took these two shots. And can I scooch this up a bit so you can see the tree a little bit better? There we go. Okay. Two photos of a Christmas tree. So here's photo one, and here's it shrunk it when I shrunk it. Oh, web browsers are silly. I don't know if I can. Let me see. I'm gonna try. We're gonna do this. All right, we made it a little bit bigger. Now, does it stay? No, it doesn't stay. Technology foils us again. Yeah, this is gonna look really silly on the stream. Let me just. Nope. Even if I minimize the chat, maybe if I do that, that's a little bit better. But you're not really gonna be able to see what I'm talking about here. So I took these two photos, and I said, well, which phone do you like better, phone A or phone B? And I think most people liked this first photo better, but it's a little bit darker. There's a Christmas tree, and then there are all these little signs. It's like a wavy background in the Newark airport, and yeah, I kind of agreed. Something that had just a touch more contrast brought out a darker green. There's a lot more blue in the green in the brighter image. I think most people in the Discord were saying like, yeah, I kind of like that first one better. Well, the joke's on you. They're both from the same phone. So all I did was shift the angle not slightly. I shifted the angle significantly enough that there was slightly different exposure information on one side and slightly different lighting on the other. And these are both shots from the OnePlus 12. And this is one of those things where you just being off a little bit as the phone makes different decisions for how it's going to expose for the scene. If you're off just a little, you're not really capturing the same scene. So that was a really long, rambling way to get into some of the review philosophy that's just been kind of slowing me down a little bit, but it's also something I want to hold to. If I go out and I shoot a bunch of low light nighttime photos and samples and stuff, and I'm holding up these phones, as I compose for that first shot, I'm really thinking about like, oh, I'm going to frame this house and I want this and I want, that kind of lighting. I'm really going for a night mode photo, and then I want a raw image so that we can compare the difference between just the camera sensor output and then what happens when image processing gets really, really intense. And then I go through 4 more phones. By that 5th phone, I'm pretty sure I'm not composing for that phone. right? I'm not really giving that photo my attention. I'm not really giving it the best. So, am I really getting the best that I can get out of that phone? And then each one of these phones is a ridiculous onslaught. So in so many of these like landscape nighttime photos that I'm taking, I want one from the ultra wide and one from the main wide and one from the telephoto. Oh, you know what? This phone has 4 sensors, so I need the medium and the long telephoto. And then I want raw caps for each, and then I want, low light, night mode photos for each, then maybe a portrait mode if there's lighting and I want to kind of do something where I'm taking a photo of my face. Do I need video samples in that same spot? And each setup that you see probably had, I don't know, 12 photos associated, sometimes 24 if I double that up and I want to make sure I'm getting the best focus and exposure values for each. And then maybe there's a 10-second snippet of video in the ultra wide and a 10-second snippet of video in the main wide. And that's what it takes. That's what it takes to really give that phone your attention, and that you're delivering, that you're really trying to deliver the best possible quality of what that phone can accomplish. Otherwise, if I just go out there and I streamline 5 different devices all at the same time, I'm probably picking one that I'm really thinking through, and all the others just become add-ons. I really feel like so many of our comparisons fall into that trap where one phone was already kind of predetermined. Someone had a bias or a preference for that one device, and they're really using that to set the shot, and then the other phone just kind of gets tacked on. And I don't want to do that. I'm trying to avoid it, but it means every night this week, I've got to go hike for a couple hours with a different phone to try and replicate and set up and figure out these shots. I've gotten it to a point where in our neighborhood, for example, there's like this little creepy path with a street lamp, and I use that as just sort of a nighttime scene to see how bad the lens flares are, and you can kind of get a sense of internal reflections from the videos. I move the camera around. It's not as good as the creepy tunnel from back in the day. It's the creepy path. Creepy path is not as cool as creepy tunnel. But when I go to shoot that landmark, there is a crack in the sidewalk that I stand on every single time. When I do one of those rear camera selfies late at night, there is a block of cement that I stand on, and then I align the camera with the lamp post halfway down my street. So as I'm holding the phone up and I like angle it, I'm closing one eye and I'm using my light tree here. I like cinch it right up, and then when I take that photo, it's never perfect, but it's generally in the same field of view that I do for every single phone I review. When I'm trying to see lens reflections in sort of like flares from off-axis lighting, there's a lamppost that I stand under every single time to do that. So if you go and see, especially now that we've been in Agora for a couple of years now, if you go back and you see some of those older videos where I was just starting to find these spots, I'm still trying to pick about the same places so that you could look at one video from 2 years ago and a video from today, and you could actually see like, oh, yeah, these landmarks actually kind of line up. I could see photo quality from one and compare that with photo quality from another. That kind of makes sense. To me, that's what a review should be. It should be consistency of approach, not just, I went out and I took a picture of some random fire hydrant and some stairs, and you can tell by the HDRs it's not good, it's good enough. And that's not really photography. No one's just taking random photos of poorly composed architecture and stairs. Maybe Barry. I don't know. Is Barry still in the chat? Barry likes doing that. I realized I had the chat off. Yeah, there's some good stuff here. Hold on, let me take a quick sip of coffee here, and we can get into some shenanigans, some conversation here. Oh, people are saying the video's freezing. There's literally nothing I can do about that. Like, if I were doing the live stream and I saw any evidence of like glitching, locking up on video, I'd probably have made some adjustments. You'll hear what's kind of funny. So leading up to the podcast this morning, I was having these massive issues. Stuff was really not working. I would fire up, so I use like NVIDIA Broadcast to do all this like camera hijinkery. And oh, Barry does say Barry loves him some stairs. Like it's really, you can't tell how good a camera is until you see a poorly composed shot of some office building's stairs. I don't even know why I bother trying to find like subjects and flowers and composition and depth of field, because like all you need to know is whether or not like an off-angled, poor horizon level shot of stairs looks gooder than a pixel. And then you know how the camera is good enough. So I'm setting everything up this morning, and I'm trying to something is wrong with my mouse. As soon as I turn on OBS, my mouse just locks. And every time I move it, there's like a 5-second delay between where my movement in my hand and where that mouse cursor ends up. And if you're on a gaming mouse, like a little flick, sends your mouse cursor halfway across the screen. So I go through everything. I reset. I rebooted the computer. First, you start with that. You try turning it off and on again. I killed all my browsers. I got out of Restream. I shut down OBS, brought it back up. Then I noticed there was an update for NVIDIA Broadcast that's supposed to fix some of the issues. Apparently, there were some hot fixes needed for the new Windows update. So I run that. Doesn't change anything. I've been sitting on updating OBS because I don't like touching OBS unless something is legit like broken, but I update OBS, mouse cursor's still locking. I cannot figure it out. It makes the computer completely unusable when I've got NVIDIA Broadcast, a Chrome browser with Restream up, and OBS. It's like the three together lock my mouse cursor. Can't figure it out. On a whim, I flick my mouse from cabled operation to wireless dongle operation, and now my mouse works great. Everything's fine. Totally fixed. That's the madness of setting up a weekly stream. I've not changed anything. For some reason, USB on my computer is doing something different now, and that causes my mouse cursor to lock up when I have a combination of OBS, NVIDIA Broadcast, and Restream all working at the same time. So now that it's going wireless, everything's great. It's even funnier. Is like I still have it connected to the USB cable because that's how it gets power. It's how it charges. It's not an Apple mouse. It was designed by actual engineers that understand how humans work. So it it doesn't make any sense. Jojo the Techie, absolutely. Shouldn't it be the opposite? You would think if your mouse cursor was locking up, that working wired should be more consistent than working wireless. So apologies if y'all are catching the live stream and there's stuff happening or like the video is getting chopped. My video has been buttery smooth. I have NVIDIA Broadcast, Restream, and OBS, and I'm looking at all three, and none of them are showing anything twitchy. So that means somewhere in between me sending this up to Restream and Restream sending this out to Twitch and to YouTube, there is some kind of glitching or artifacting happening. There's literally nothing I can do. So I apologize on behalf of the streaming platforms and providers that this is where we're at. SOC, So I did want to just highlight, we did have one little, let me get this over here. We did have one little post put out on the Patreon. Something I'm trying to make a more regular column out of because we get great questions and great conversation that happens on some of these topics, and why not just start expanding on some of that? So this is the second patron pregunta. Let me kind of fire this up here. Dongles that rival LG's Quad DAC. A question from Funky X-Mix. I almost want to say Funke X-Mix, but Funky X-Mix, how about the dongles you have reviewed, any of them on the same level for audio quality for IEMs versus the LG V60? And technically, happily, the answer is yes, mostly. In that first paragraph, I kind of spell out what I think is kind of the philosophical difference between different types of audio hardware. There's a specific character to LG solution which I don't believe has been employed in other devices. The term quad DAC was a literal description of how LG reproduced audio. They used ESS hardware, but ran audio through 4 stages to improve signal and reduce self noise and distortion. It was a wildly clever adaptation for its time, especially in a phone, because phones are kind of messy internally, and this was a solid way to reduce issues with radios and antennas and shielding. And then I kind of go through, there are certain characteristics to a good DAC, things that I think, beyond just do you get the 24-bit 96 kilohertz frequency response audio that can properly represent signal that even dogs can't hear, right? So there's like an idea of quality, but then there were characteristics to the LG DAC that I think made it really impressive. Like that impresses the ear more than just is it 24-bit high res. So breaking that down, especially over the last year, and this is what gets really exciting, especially over the last year, there have been some technical advances in portable mini dongle and component DACs that help at least kind of catch us up to what made the LG Quad DAC so special. So that was a great question from Funky X Mix. And I've got another one already lined up talking about phones to buy for productivity. Someone really wanted to hear my thoughts on productivity, and I felt like that would be a fun kickoff. So if you have any thoughts on audio reproduction and dongle DACs, portable DACs, maybe you don't want to go dongle DAC. Maybe you want to go with more of like a flask or like an iFi, something it's a bit bigger. This is like having a whole other phone in your pocket. But if you really want a specific characteristic of audio reproduction, it is wild what you can do with a little battery powered device that technically can fit in a pocket. So, Jojo the Techie, well, the audio of your stream is perfect, so we'll live. Usually that's the other way around too. Usually my video is fine and the audio is giving us issues. From JJ48, maybe I do need to update the Restream key, but I'm going through the Restream browser, so it's not. This is what's messy. I'm really only using OBS for some of these transitions and stuff. Actually, you know what? I could probably do with just getting rid of OBS and going all browser. That makes me feel weird. I don't know that I'll do that. OMFG, not LG again. Wait, you've got people on V60s. So the V60 is now a 5-year-old phone. You've got people on V60s that are eventually gonna have to start giving them up. People who really used the LG V60, there is no replacement for it. There is nothing. If you wanted a phone that had amazing battery life, incredible like audiophile tier reproduction, that had a desktop mode so you could use it as a little mini portable computer. Maybe you liked the dual display, so you had a regular phone and a folding phone all in one. There is no device, headphone jack and expandable storage. You pop in a memory card. There is nothing that touches the LG V60. Sure, I am having so much fun playing with new devices that are wildly powerful. There is so much less I can do with this phone here, even though the chip is more powerful. It's a poorer computer than the LG V60. So, unfortunately, those components are dying. And your ability to find like replacement parts and swap components and replace batteries and do all that stuff is on the decline fast. So someone has to make that jump and go to another device. I think we need the tech empathy out there, guys. That there was this little component of hardcore audio nerds that now need to find solutions for something that used to be built into their phone. And instead of saying, ugh, we should be saying, man, it really is a bummer that this thing doesn't exist for people who want it. Because eventually, something's going to happen to your favorite devices, and you're going to say, oh, but it's such a bummer, I used to have this thing. And don't you want people to care? Is again, extend the sympathy when it's not you, so that you'll get the empathy when it is you. And look, Sean popped up. I started talking about LG, and Sean was like, you know what, you're right. LG. It's about that V60. I know, Sean's a big fan, so I'm glad he was here for that. Oh, apparently Sean was digging into his wallet over Christmas. He got a Red Magic 10 Pro and a new Mac Mini. I love it. Al Sabakli saying, I have the V60 right here with my secondary SIM in it. Use it a lot. No sensitive apps or data on it, though. And Marilyn's just wishing everyone a happy new year, saying good morning. Everyone give Marilyn a shout. Just a good, happy hello and a new year there. So, everything that we're going to be talking about this week, all of the show notes. I mean, obviously, I had this one post on the Patreon. But again, like I said, it's something I'm wanting to do more of. And if you have questions, I'd really love to just kind of dig into a meaty article, right? This is the thing that hits us with, excuse me, having a blog or having a Patreon, something that gives you a bit more of your own localized platform. Um, I can write this up on something like YouTube, right? YouTube has a community service, and I can go long form in the YouTube community posts, but no one engages with that beyond just this like temporary little bubble spike of it's a new thing and YouTube put it through a few people's feeds and then vanishes. But if we want to follow up on these conversations and we really want to dig into it, other people are going to have advice here. You might have contradictory advice. You might disagree with my assessment on portable DACs. I'm not the singular authority. I really don't want to be the last word in a conversation. I want to start and host a conversation. And there are ways for us to do this that don't have Facebook and YouTube algorithms standing on our necks. So I hope people will jump in. To me, this is the fun stuff. Is like, let's really dig into the philosophy here. I think I wrote like 1,000 words on DAC performance to then start saying, like, well, if it's this, if you want amp, it's this. If it was that you liked filtering, it's that. If you liked this kind of control, it's something different. Everybody had a different reason for why they liked a specific audio feature. And that's hard to replace. When it's taken away from you, it's really difficult to get that back. Oh, Darcy. Yeah. I was into Amiga computers back in the day. I know about my favorite devices going away. So it's so funny. My mom was like, yeah, I was so glad that he did this. When she was when she was in school and she was coding, we had a little 8088 XT, but she had started on other systems just doing like basic, right? You know, and just kind of hobbyist stuff. And she was like, I'm really glad that school made us do this because it kind of primed us for that. I grew up learning how to use DOS. I mean, that transferred over into sitting in computer labs and learning Unix commands. It's like it was just through luck that that's the kind of home compute experience that we had. It's so wild. Like, oh man, I was really into this thing and then it was taken away. Oh, I really liked this feature and then they cut it. And like in this age where our devices are incredibly powerful and we have tons of space on them because they've gotten larger and larger and larger over time, it's just so sad that we can't hold on to a few of these things that made those unique devices so special. From Anthony, the mini Bluetooth DAC amps have come a long way to fill the void that the V60 left. They have. I just held up a Bluetooth DAC. I've reviewed a number of these little like portable adapters. They're not really dongle DACs, but they're DACs that connect over USB-C cables. And again, the thing is, it's not that those products aren't great. Those products are awesome. What we can do with a little DAC chip in a tiny portable enclosure is amazing. The thing that I think V60 fans are frustrated about is that used to just be built into their phone. And now they have to carry some other device or put extra wear and tear on a USB-C port or manage additional batteries to charge. Those batteries will burn out over time. If the V60 had kind of continued, if LG had kind of continued in the market, it'd be more likely there would be a better quantity of repair parts. So you could keep a V60 running longer. Maybe you could also look eventually at some kind of like custom ROM support, you know, kind of get on LG for stuff like that. You can keep it out of a landfill with that amazing audio hardware built in. Then you don't have to worry about replacing a Bluetooth adapter. You just swap the battery and you have a brand new phone all over again. It's this, again, it's not that there's only one way to do this. Bluetooth can do really well in this space. But was a solution for a certain group of consumers, and now that solution is gone. And now there's nothing for them. So again, you just think, what is like one of my favorite things, and what if someone just took it away and there was nothing to replace it? If Valve tomorrow decides we don't want to make another Steam Deck, I'm not out in the cold. I have a wild variety of other portable gaming console PC things that I can choose. You know, I can go get an Asus or the Lenovo or the MSI or any of these like Ioneo kinds of variants. There's one other phone that kind of bills itself as an audiophile phone, and it's not a premium tier powerful processing device. You could get a Sony. The amp is not as good as on a Sony. Like there's nothing left that truly fills the spot that the V60 left. Juan is starting the first word order. I don't know what that means, Simon. I'm sorry. Well, let me take a drink of coffee, and then we've got some news that we got to dig into. And the first one is kind of a yet another eulogy for something that was really important. So hold on 1 second here. Okay, so jumping in, I do want to. Oh, that's right. I had to reboot my computer like 3 times. There we go. Oh, first world order. I don't know what that means. I'm so sorry. Okay. Uh, we were starting off with an article here from Ars Technica. Funnily enough, kind of bouncing back and forth between where all this stuff was published. It's kind of battling Ars and CNN for our first couple stories, but these are where I found these topics, and I felt like had really good write ups on what was going on. Um, we always want to start with a little politics, and this is something that we need to keep an eye on because this is an ongoing, ridiculous battle, war of attrition that has been happening since the second Bush administration. And it's just galling that we kind of know what the final outcome of this should be, but we're still pretending to have this fight in ways that doesn't deliver any decisive change. At some point, a decision needs to be made, and then we can kind of get on with our lives. But instead, we're playing this game of ping pong, knocking this idea back and forth. I am, of course, talking about net neutrality. This is written up by Ashley Bellinger over at Ars Technica. Appeals court blocks FCC's efforts to bring back net neutrality rules. In his opinion, U.S. Circuit Judge Richard Allen Griffin wrote that the FCC lacked the authority to impose the net neutrality rules under the telecommunications service provision of the Communications Act. Quote, the core of the dispute here is whether broadband internet service providers like Xfinity or Spectrum offer a telecommunications service or an information service. End quote. Because judges agreed that they offer the latter. The court ruled that they could not be subjected to the FCC's net neutrality policies. The key here is not whether broadband internet service providers utilize telecommunications, it is instead whether they do so while offering to consumers the capability to do more. The FCC exceeded its statutory authority, arguing for a reading of the statute that is too sweeping. So, now, according to the lobbyists for the telecommunications industry and now a circuit judge, what you have on the internet is an information service, just like anything else that transmits data on the internet. And I feel that that is an incorrect assessment of what information versus telecommunication is. But essentially, now we're going into this next presidential administration, which already gutted net neutrality the first time, and is probably going to be going after organizations like the FCC and the FTC. I would be very surprised if that modest funding increase for the FTC is maintained over the next 4 years. It's wild to me that like we're looking at all of these industries going, nah, We should just let companies do whatever they want. It's fine. But this judge's ruling is that in this debate, the FCC is claiming the internet is a telecommunication service, and that's not. And this judge disagrees. So we covered this a while back. I actually posted the audio of those arguments going back and forth, and you can hear how quickly judges can be sort of distracted and tangented over into other talking points. When the lobbyists, the lawyers representing the lobbyists for the telecommunications industry started talking about these distinctions, they start making these very hyper specific, well, what you have is a line, and it's sort of like this, but then information goes from point to point. And then the judge would say, well, doesn't that constitute a telecommunication service? And you're like, well, no, because then the information has to go somewhere else, and that's transformative. So that's an information service. And you're like, it's a legal distinction that really doesn't float a practical examination of this business or this industry. We treat things like phones as telecommunication services. How many of you, here in the chat, I'd love to see, how many of you are running an old school copper phone line to your home? That's protected and regulated by the FCC as a telecommunication service, information that goes from one point to the other. But I don't run one. We actually do have a phone, a home phone line, because that was the cheapest way to get spectrum to give us internet access, was to bundle all of this stuff that we kind of didn't need just to get a lower rate on our broadband. But the phone that goes to our home is data. So we're still regulating phone calls specifically as this telecommunication service when the entire backbone of data infrastructure is considered an information service. You know what else is an information service? Is going online to a website like google.com. Well, the FCC can't tell Google what to do. That's an information service. That's just information. It's not telecommunications, it's just information. The internet is just information that lives on another telecommunication service. Those regulations were written when phone lines, copper phone lines, 56K modems were how we transmitted information. The internet was this little baby service that lived on our telecommunication phone lines. Now, the internet has eaten all of those telecommunication phone lines, but the FCC's overreached. It's too much authority. I love it. Love it, love it, love it. So, really, moving forward, we pretty much, I think at this point, need to give up on the net neutrality fight for the next 4 years. The only thing that's going to move the needle on this is getting a left-leaning legislature in place and a left-leaning president that isn't going to veto this, and it's going to take an act of Congress. They actually have to write it into a law. You can't just have legal precedent to say, well, this is how we handled tech in the past, and this is how tech has changed, so a judge has ruled that the FCC can maintain authority over the internet. Because there's one side of the aisle here politically that has no respect for precedent. Legal precedent's thrown out the window whenever it's convenient for them. So the only way that this is going to work is if Congress explicitly writes a law saying the FCC is the organization that regulates information services like the internet. And then the FCC would have this legal authority to go in and regulate broadband. That's not going to happen over the next 4 years. And even if we were to flip political sides in 4 years, we can see how weak and how, I guess, inconsistent in approach the liberal side of this has been. Where it took 3 years just to break up the deadlock of the FCC. We lost 3 years of the FCC being able to make any kind of meaningful change to telecommunications industry during the Biden administration. So for whatever reason, even though this is like the backbone of our economy, the future of education, it's this most critical component of healthcare, we still kind of treat the internet as this geeky nerdy thing that no one wants to touch. That's geeky nerdy stuff. No one cares about that. So even if we did flip political sides in 4 years, it's going to be years before there's any kind of push or initiative to make this change happen, while the entire telecommunications industry is dumping money to influence our politicians. So unfortunately, it's something that I think we kind of just need to back burner. It's going to be maddening over the next 4 years to see how our regulatory agencies are gutted, and I can't weather that constant frustration. Tangential tesseract. States being a bulwark can help. A few have net neutrality in law now. Hopefully, more can follow suit. Again, this is always one of the things that I've been bringing up. So right now, the crux of our net neutrality policy is basically enforced by New York and California. So because those are two of the most populous states with humongous economies unto themselves, the whole rest of the country kind of has to follow suit. But this is also yet another area where one side of this political aisle doesn't care about tradition or precedent. So, this is a political administration that's coming in that doesn't have any problems finding ways to gut states' rights. So, over the next 4 years, if it becomes problematic for too many corporate donors that net neutrality in California is getting in their way, then we can see some other federal policy adopted that would start to erode the agency of individual states to police their own borders, to have their own laws. That would be another really awful circumstance to have play out over the next couple years. I think it's moderate likely. Not extremely likely, but moderate likely something like that could play out if enough rich people got upset that they weren't richer enough. That would get cut off at the knees. Oh yeah, Darcy, like, don't even get me started on that. Sadly, Democrat doesn't imply left-leaning, although not Democrat 100% implies not left-leaning. Yeah, Democrats have basically just become the catch-all for everyone else who doesn't fit on the other side. It is an entire political spectrum unto itself that has nothing to do with policy. It's just, we didn't fit on that other team, so I guess we'll just go over here. So it's great. It's great. We always got to start off with a chat about how depressing the future is going to be. Another law. Again, I'm not qualified to talk on this, but again, I have to bring up whenever these court battles play out, just how unlikely the resolution of this court case will be to change corporate behavior. I'm going to put this up. This is from CNN. Who has the byline on this? Oh, it's a Reuters feed. Okay, so this was from Reuters. I should have just tried to pull up the Reuters. So it's not CNN. Ha ha! In your face, CNN. You did nothing except reshare this, and that's how I found it. Let me switch over here. Apple to pay $95 million. $95 million to settle Siri privacy lawsuit. I just want to point this out because, Apple's the privacy company. What happens on iPhone stays on iPhone. There's private and secure, except for all of your browser data basically leaking whenever someone finds a Safari exploit, and how you can use basic API calls to track everyone's location because of how awful Apple's location policy is. And they're trying to build backdoors into all their devices so they can reduce their server costs on scanning content that gets uploaded to iCloud. And now, that feeling you have when you're holding your phone and you're talking about something, and then you go to do something on your phone and you see ads that are relevant to the physical conversation that you had, I feel that's traditionally been a Google complaint, right? On the Android side. We all kind of feel Android and Amazon devices, they're constantly listening. We have audio logs of Amazon devices basically just recording things when you put a smart speaker in your home. But for anyone that's sitting there saying, "Oh, but I use Apple because Apple is private and secure," not even it's the same. And in fact, it seems like Apple is increasingly able to get away with worse than what Google and Amazon do because of their market perception in being the privacy security company. So, just kind of getting to here. Apple agreed. Again, it wasn't that they were found guilty or that they were found of any wrongdoing. Apple agreed to pay $95 million in cash to settle a proposed class action lawsuit claiming that its voice activated assistant Siri violated users' privacy. I love it. Mobile device owners complained that Apple routinely recorded their private conversations after they activated Siri unintentionally and disclosed their conversations to third parties such as advertisers. Apple has denied wrongdoing in agreeing to settle. So, let's say, because Apple really worked to hurt Meta and Facebook on their platform, especially at the peak of the pandemic. And Apple also really turns the screws to any company that tries to describe what the working relationship is between developers and Apple. We saw that with WordPress. Excuse me. So, I'm curious, anyone here in the chat, let's say Apple has a business because they sell their own ads now. They are their own advertising corporation. That is one of the fastest growing sectors of Apple financial growth. Is this other services, ads, marketing, the built-in hierarchical organization of the App Store and other services that are promoted by Apple. Apple makes a lot of money selling that influence. So let's say Apple was getting great user data because of interactions with Siri. And then they were selling that block of user behavior to influence how ads were served on their platform. Does anyone in this chat think that a $95 million settlement is going to change the behavior of Apple devices listening, their AI play? Because now it's not just Siri, now it's Apple Intelligence. Is this gonna change Apple behavior at all? When the Apple services growth, I think, is somewhere, the Apple services, the other sector of like Apple growth, I want to say is 20 billion, like 20 billion in revenue, something like that. Someone please correct me if I had that wrong from their last financials. I mean, I guess yearly financials. So if Apple's business practices in selling ads, incorporating user data from Siri search and Siri enabled audio conversations, is somewhere like 20 billion in revenue, will a $95 million settlement where they admit no wrongdoing, they've not done anything wrong, is that going to change this at all? So, Kapakash, privacy is just marketing to Apple. I mean, yeah, they make so much money on this reputation that is not deserved at all. Let's see. Oh, Jojo the Techie saying, nope, it'll get worse. Apple has basically, that's kind of the point I was getting at. And Jojo really cut to the quick. There's that. That's pennies to them, says Jojo. Like, if you're making billions on a certain type of strategy or behavior and you get fined tens of millions, that's a rounding error. That's not even a penalty. Like, Apple avoids more taxes than that in a fiscal quarter than they would ever worry about that impacting their bottom line. Like, you would not really see that on a yearly financial statement. It would just be absorbed in the next 2 days of Apple profitability. So yeah, again, it's not that, oh, but Google do bad too. Well, we should rightfully go after companies that do this. But there's a market perception that Apple isn't doing anything wrong. We know Google and Microsoft and Amazon are doing bad things. When Google traffics all of your Wi Fi data to set up their location network, 10 years ago, they got fined and they had to deal with court cases. And those court cases played out. I mean, there were, I want to say it was like one of the first like major $1 billion fines for Google. So when Apple does the exact same thing, it's barely a blip. So my issue isn't, oh, Apple did a bad thing, so Google is better. No. It's that if we were switching the name of the company in here, I feel there would be some extra zeros at the end of this penalty, at the end of this fine. And even that would be insufficient, but it would be a difference in how we're handling it. My problem is the consistency of the response to what company we're going after. And one company is more popular than the other. So I guess it's fine when they break the rules. I guess it's okay. It's fine. Apple didn't do anything wrong. They paid 95 million because they didn't do anything wrong. They don't want to get to court because then they'd have to tell people about what they did. Then it would be publicly disclosed how all of your Apple devices are talking to you. But you know what? As long as they don't have to admit wrongdoing, totally fine. No harm, no foul. Literally, legally, no harm, no foul. From H2 Otaku. Of course, Juan, the system is just like Apple in that it just works. And so you can rest assured that Apple have once again learned their lesson. They will keep learning their lessons. I'm going to start calling you Skrek. I'm so sorry. I cannot. Unless if you can phonetically write out how I'm supposed to say this username, I feel so bad. I really do. I'm not being snarky. I genuinely want to attribute comments to the right people. Skrek is saying, Juan, but amount is not the most important part of it. Regulatory bodies can do much more about it than that is outside of fines. That would be true, but for a regulatory agency to get involved, there has to be some tacit acknowledgement of wrongdoing. So when a class action starts, a class action is one of those things that can help draw regulatory action to that space, right? So in this scenario here, a regulatory body is going to be unlikely to go after Apple because the evidence that would have come forth from a trial is now not accessible to them. If they had gone to a class action lawsuit, if they had gone before a judge and this information were made public, then that would be public documenting of this wrongdoing, and then the regulatory agency would have more ammunition to go after Apple and make that market correction on Apple's business behavior. And that's why this is such a downer. The lawyers don't want to have to fight Apple lawyers. No lawyers are going to be well funded as Apple's. No one wants that uphill climb. But the best possible outcome for those lawyers' clients is to go for the settlement, get that money. They probably take a third or half. So, they just made a $30 million payday, and then little bits of money are distributed out to everyone who's ever had an iPhone or an Apple Watch or an Apple TV. And that's not justice, but in a corporate climate like we have today, it's as close as we can get sometimes. So unfortunately, it cuts a lot of the regulators off at the knees, but this is the kind of information that will influence EU politics. EU regulators will go after these kinds of situations a bit more directly because they have actual regulations in place, like the GDPR, that are going to help them more aggressively track this kind of behavior. Awesome Possum, specifically Meta products. I had my phone all the way off recently, talked about the Jollibee fast food with the people in my old pre-connected car, and immediately saw Jollibee content and ads. It's so, again, people react to this like it's some kind of urban legend or like it's some kind of tech myth. Oh, you think your phone's listening to you. But it's also an anecdotal experience that so many of us share that, like, I've never picked up my phone and searched for this topic, but now I'm seeing ads about this thing that I talked to my wife about. We're constantly surrounded by devices that are passively listening. I'm having to be really careful about what words I say in this office, not because I'm worried about being followed, I'm worried about turning on a dozen screens. Like if I say a certain hot word key command, Google has tons of audio, literally just from this podcast, of every single time I've said something that then lights up auto search and assistance and stuff like that, which I feel I need to use so that I can intelligently talk about those kinds of features in my reviews. But they're things that I tend to disable on my own personal devices, not because I'm scared of the security and privacy, but because they're annoying, because they get in my way more than they help. But this is what they're saying is like a triggering of Siri is now lighting up additional information that's going to Apple servers, and that was not the intent of what that assistant should have done, and that should look like some kind of privacy violation. Gadget Guy 2020, in your best Sylvester Stallone Judge Dredd voice, I am the law. I can't do a good Stallone. Yeah, that'd be a good one. Jojo the Techie. They only settled because ain't nobody got time for that going to court. I love it. No, I like if I were the lawyers on the other side, if I were the lawyers representing the class, there's no way. There is no way I'd want to fight Apple. They'd just exhaust us and bankrupt us. And again, you'll never get justice working with Apple. This one is just a little quick. This isn't a long story, and we don't have to spend a lot of time on it. But it was just an interesting little blip in everything that's happening out in the world right now. Presidential administrations changing, influence over politicians. I think it can be easy to lose sight of actual market trends because we're so focused on talking about the economy, which is basically just speculation on stocks. At this point, whenever they say the economy is healthy, all that means is the perception of companies that are publicly traded seems like it feels healthy. Has nothing to do with the actual performance of those companies in the market. And it has everything to do with just these wild cults of personality surrounding the billionaires, the tops of many of these organizations. So this one just kind of popped up on my radar. This is just a blurb here on Ars Technica again from Jonathan Gitlin. John Gitlin, the automotive editor. Tesla sales fell for the first time in over a decade. Tesla sold almost 1.8 million cars in 2024, according to data released by the company this morning. Unfortunately for the electric automaker, it sold more than 1.8 million cars in 2023. I said that funky. Anyway, beating this year's effort by 19,355 vehicles, but unlike last year, it sold more cars than it built, with production falling by 4% in 2024. So just like an interesting little trend. Because we can look at like Tesla is one of the most popular EV automakers in the world, I guess. But as they've been facing more competition, as traditional automakers have tried to step, like dipping their toe into the EV space, and while China is radically pushing EV forward, especially with like state-sponsored initiatives, like for your social media score is going to be better if you own a Chinese EV than if you buy a foreign gas-powered car. Things like that they can really kind of put not just market pressure, but like individual consumer pressure on buying habits. It's kind of interesting to me is we should see Tesla market share drop quickly, right? There's just more automobiles out on the road that are electric. But is the company still growing their user base? I think I mentioned this. It was one of the things like I want to say it was on smartwatches. I can't remember what article I wrote that in. But again, it's that perception. Like you can always make news sound good or bad depending on your bias or your preference. So I'm making up an example here. This isn't what I wrote in the article, but it's smartwatches. We'll do smartwatches. At once, you can point out how Apple's market share in smartwatches has dropped pretty significantly. You put that in your headline, game over for Apple. Look, competition's starting to eat them up. Now, what are they going to do? If you're into that Apple Watch stuff, I'd be real nervous about Apple's play there. You only format that headline to get a specific kind of emotional response out of your readership. And it's likely you're playing into the bias. So, like, say you run an Android, predominantly Android website, if you phrase that, you know you're going to get a lot of traffic on any Apple story because Apple and media and marketing and search engines and popularity bias. But you can phrase it in a way that validates the perspective of your readership. Because the flip side of that would be Apple has never sold more Apple Watches in the history of the company. So their device, their product growth is still increasing. Apple's never made more money than they have ever in the past in this market or product segment. So you could put that headline on Mac Rumors saying Apple grows revenue in this space and Apple Watch is now 5% higher in sales year over year, blah, 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 blah. So while we can point to Tesla data and market share and stock price, those aren't the metrics of how the company is succeeding. It's, are they building more cars and are they selling more cars? And that's what the company actually does. You say the stock is worth so many billions and billions and billions of dollars. That's just someone guessing how much Tesla could be worth if you sold the company that day. It's just a guess. It has nothing to do with how much money they really spend and how much money they really earn. So again, as we kind of go over the next year, I'm not planning. So many of my tech brethren have done this thing where they transition over to like reviewing cars. I'm not interested in that, but I do like looking at this market, and especially because over the next year or two, Marie and I are really going to get serious about shopping our first EV. We have an old busted Nissan. It's finally time just to let it go. This is like a really old car. I'm gonna miss it. It's our little red beat up sedan. It's such a no frills vehicle, but it's time. It's time to start looking at getting rid of it. But as we start looking at like the EV market, it's been kind of crazy to see like, oh well, we've got these Hyundai's. Subaru just put one out. I'm really interested in a more traditional car manufacturer making that transition to something like that. So it's interesting to me. There's a perception around a brand like Tesla. And now buying a Tesla means more than just buying the Tesla. But their recent initiatives haven't seemed to broaden. How do I want to say this? The recent moves from Tesla haven't broadened their consumer base. I think that's kind of how I want to phrase it. It doesn't feel to me like Tesla is finding more newer consumers for their products. And especially with how much focus they've put on things like Cybertruck, that actively turns off people like me. What I really want is a good kind of hot hatch or mid-size. Like I was really interested in what Rivian was showing off. I hope those vehicles come to market. I'm probably going to end up with an Ioniq just because I like what Hyundai's doing in this space. And that's where Tesla hasn't really been delivering. If Tesla had come out with like a small little hatchback like they had originally talked about on their roadmap, I probably would have jumped on one by now. Even with my issues, the leadership of that company and the political issues that have come from that company, that would have been the right car for our family's needs. But they haven't done that. So it's kind of interesting to me. What are the numbers really telling us? And if we see a dip year over year, that's really not great for the company. And especially, I would say that a small part of that dip is likely the influence of the leadership at Tesla, or I should say, the leader of Tesla, kind of getting in the way of the company's progress. If I were a shareholder, I'd be very concerned about the shenanigans of the CEO of that company. Sorry, from our previous news story, Gadget Guy 2020. Happy little privacy accidents. I love that Bob Ross. That's great right there. I love it. JJ4884, could it be because fewer people are able to afford a new car now? So I think market trends, absolutely, you need to examine what your customers can do. But when we look at the pie, and again, I would say like don't focus as much on just the United States, but when we broaden this to international, when we look at the market trends around the world, there are other areas of the world that are growing some of this middle class luxury, first time consumers buying cars. We can see where the state pressure that China can put on their own industry can help embolden. It can help. What's the word that I want to use there? It can help increase, for lack of a better word, it can help increase that kind of consumer spending. And so, yes, I believe you do have a very valid point here that a lot of middle class and lower middle class families are struggling to kind of keep up, and these types of purchases, they're not looking to buy new cars, but we still have sales trends of the entire EV market, and Tesla isn't doing the things that I think the company should be doing to grow their consumer base. And instead, it might be we're kind of peaking what Tesla represents, and who's buying a Tesla, those customers might be served. You're not finding new customers to add to their ranks. So again, I think it's just one. I think it really interesting to kind of see how this plays out over the next year. Hey, Enrique saying you. Enrique says, I think I would have loved to review cars before EVs. Ricky. So I'm hoping this means we're going to be seeing even more from you on Twitch and in streams, and maybe making some videos again, man. It's always good to see your face, and just get into some of those conversations on Threads. Cheers, buddy. I was always the EV nerd, so now actually would be the time for me to make that transition. I just don't. The amount of time it takes me just to do a phone review, I can't imagine like I need to make everything look like Top Gear, and look, here's footage of me driving, and I've got the indoor, like in the cabin cameras, and I've got to do like I'm gonna drive around on this track and set up cameras and get B-roll. Like, I just can't. I would have so much fun driving the cars. I can't make that video. I'd like make a video a month, and I'm used to making like 4 videos a week. I need something that's just a bit more accessible. Like, I can't shoot a car in my office. Oh, Aditya Anil, I can't wait for the 2027 Cybertruck V2 unboxing from Juan. Look, I pulled this cable, and then the flat opens up, and it's a Cybertruck. All... Uh... Michael C., I would feel gross having to be inside of a car manufactured by a company run by Elon Musk. It sucks. My mom still loves her Model 3, but she's now like starting conversations with people about like, I would not buy one today. She still has like very early production run Model 3. And she's pointing everybody to every other device. We were at Christmas, little family reunion for Christmas. And she was actively like pulling up on people's phones like, you drive a Subaru? Look, Subaru just came out with an EV. So she's like gone from being a Tesla evangelist to being an EV evangelist. I guess she always kind of was, but Tesla was like the best option to pick if you wanted an EV. Now she is very aggressively pointing out to people like, oh, you don't have to worry about road trips. This is how I charge. And oh, you don't have to worry about this because this is what happens. And look, if you want to go fast, these are go fast machines. You can definitely do all the power and stuff. But she's actively like pointing people to all these other options in the market. It's wild. Like, my mom would actually be a really good reviewer, because for her, every single time she gets into one of those conversations, I think she lives this idea of, I have to be an example because people still don't understand how EVs are different. Techies do, and even if you've never driven an EV, you at least have some kind of sense of what electronics and computing and batteries and torque and power. You can kind of apply that to your experiences driving an internal combustion engine. But I still hear her have these conversations with other family members where they fundamentally don't understand what's different when you get in the cockpit of an EV. But now she's getting really good at pointing to someone's specific uses. So my uncle has a truck and he started making jokes about the Cybertruck and she went, "Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. But look at this Ford and look at this Rivian." And she was pointing specifically to things that he was doing and things that he wanted, but he needed a truck. Well, there are options for that. Again, to me, that's like the mark of someone who's really understanding a market as opposed to someone who's just a fan of a brand. So I guess I come by it honest. Maybe it's genetic. Darcy, but Tesla shareholders are all about giving the leader 50 billion for being terrible. Again, it's the cult of personality. They're worried that Tesla won't look like they're doing as good if Musk, for some reason, leaves or stops paying much attention. I feel Tesla would probably be run better with someone else in that top chair. But again, it's not about is the company really performing? It's what are the optics? Does it look like Tesla's doing exciting stuff? Oh, I totally believe it. Daniel Schwartz, believe it or not, Chevy Equinox is a serious EV competitor, excellent price and range. I've been very impressed. I mean, again, the most recent round of refreshes to the EV lineups at all these companies, I think the traditional automakers are starting to figure out, they're starting to put the pieces in place on what's going to motivate consumer buying behavior over the next 5 years. They're not there, but there are these little glimmers like, oh, I think they're getting this. Oh, I think they understand that. So there are some outlandish things out there, some really like high performance exotic kind of ideas of a Ford, of a Chevy. But then you get to something like that Equinox and you're like, oh, that is a bread and butter daily driver machine. It needs to be able to do this. I think Hyundai got there a little faster. I think the Ioniq 5 is just like the perfect vehicle for our family's needs right now. And I like that it's not enormous. I like that it feels like a car. It doesn't feel like a, a truck. We rented an SUV for Christmas for family. We ended up needing to do two vehicles because yeah, we have this like seat seven. What was it? Was an Acadia? I can't remember what it was. Um, but my brother ended up with what's the other? Just like it used to be the brand, an Expedition. Yeah, we're in this Expedition. There is so much less space inside of that thing than like an old school minivan. And so, yeah, you have the seats up and we can fit seven and we've got car seats for the little ones and all this stuff. But then you have zero room for anything else. Like there's no trunk space. There's no like aisle space. There's no way to get around inside the vehicle. It is so much worse. But it's this massive truck of a vehicle. And then I look at something like the Ionic and it's like, yeah, it's only like, it only seats five, but it's got a proper trunk and I can really put stuff in it. And it's got this really cute kind of like configuration to how the seats are arranged. Like it is so much more practical for what we need. So anyway, I would also seriously consider, even though we only have the one kid, I would seriously consider like a cute EV sport wagon. Something a little bit longer, but not riding higher. It's riding a little lower. That would be my jam. I would totally jump on something like that. Oh, yeah, Malik. It sounds like the Kia EV3 may be on your short list when it releases. I am very anxious to see what that looks like. Yeah, we might end up Ionic because it's a bit more practical, but if we're replacing little red sedan and I get my pick on little follow-up car, that Kia looks very interesting to me. Oh, Daniel Schwartz, I'll give it a listen. He says, listen to the Wheel Bearings podcast, great car review pod. I'm gonna check that out. Thank you for that. I miss like the old like Sunday morning block of car TV, like the old dudes who would just like, oh, today we're gonna take apart this carburetor, and that'd be like an amazing half hour of television. I don't look it, but I used to really love crawling under my friends' cars to do silly things like bolt turbos onto old Hondas. And I used to be really good at like just stripping a car's brakes, getting those rotors turned, bleeding the system, putting everything all back together. Like, I miss having my hands in the guts of engines that were mechanically timed. I used to have, I still have it. I have a timing gun. I threw a bearing on my, it was an 88 Camry back in the day. And so my dad and I, we had to just kind of lift, sort of partially lift the engine up out of the frame of the car, and pull out this little idler pulley and put it back in. But then your timing is all thrown off. So we would sit there and just sit there and mechanically time it. There'd be this little flash of light. Do you see the little white line that we painted on this belt? Cool. Your car runs again. And just like, I can't do anything like that, even on gas powered cars, but I can't do anything like that today. If I get in the way of an ABS sensor on the brakes, that's an expensive fix that I have to take it into a dealer for. It's just kind of a bummer. I really miss, like, it was a puzzle. It was a puzzle and a problem, and you would take the puzzle apart and put it back together again, and then it would run better. It was so good. Or it was, something exciting. Like, I would make fun of my friends. They would do like thousands of dollars on work on engines and exhaust systems. Then I'd be like, hey guys, but your suspension sucks and your brakes are not good. So you can go fast, but you can't turn and you can't stop. Oh, it's so funny. Oh, Ken X. I always saw a headline on this. I didn't read up on the story. VW EVs had gotten hacked. They do have good EVs. I needed to read up more on that. I was really happy to see that the punishment for Volkswagen's diesel shenanigans seems to have helped a little shot in the arm the EV market climbing in Europe. So I want to see some of that really kind of expand here too. But again, like, that's what we're saying is, like, now there is market pressure from traditional automobile manufacturers internationally. We're seeing Chinese automobiles really stepping up and filling these little gaps and spaces. And Tesla, I don't feel they're doing anything that really instills me with a lot of confidence that they're addressing those changes in the market. They're kind of servicing the audience of people who liked buying Teslas, but they're not trying to grow to bring more consumers into their ranks. I think it's the best I can put it anyway. It's pretty tough. Oh, JJ4884, Car Talk guys, RIP. Yeah, big heart there too. Again, just the old school, like, I love that. Like, my uncles were like this, my grandfather was like this. Just, you weren't sitting there and looking at like a Hayes guide. You would just look at this car and go, okay, well, I can take that apart. And then they'd just take it apart and they'd be like, okay, well, I see how this works. And then they'd put it all back together, and you're like, how'd you do that? During my grandfather's funeral, I got to sort of briefly catch up with my uncle Gilbert, and he's one of those guys that just, like, has always had multiple vehicles in varying stages of reconstruction or operation. But he was the first one I ever got to see a geared engine, where instead of all these belts and stuff, you would sprocket. You'd put these gears in, and it would just wild how it would crack. I forget what year it was. It was a Mustang. I want to say it was a late '60s Mustang, but you turn it over and you just hear this, and that thing was just an absolute animal. It was a beautiful automobile. But again, it was that practical, mechanical engineering kind of mindset. He was so good at it. And just, I always wanted to be able to just look at something and be like, well, I'll take it apart and I'll keep working on it until I can put it back together. Because I've never been that guy. If I don't have like the little deconstruction guide to help me take the puzzle apart, then I'm a little too nervous to get started. It's so wild. From Ali. This is another thing too. It's totally fair. Although EVs did see a spike in sales in 2022 and 23, they are going down because of a lack of infrastructure, and for a general consumer is more inconvenient, and people are just opting for hybrids. It is crazy to me. Yet again, that was another major part of the conversation my mom was having with family members was, hey, we're going to take this half step. We're going to go plug-in hybrid instead of going full EV. And that to me is probably the biggest issue is we now have a couple companies trying to compete for charging stations. I don't think anything has really quite approached the supercharger network that Tesla runs, But when I look at like those other competing solutions, they're just starting to spread in more major markets, and they're not as well maintained. So your point right there is spot on. If I were looking at all these different options, I would mostly be looking at the best city commuter that we could afford, because we would know this is for us to drive around town, get our chores done. Maybe Marie needs to go into the office. Maybe I need to go down to a film shoot, something like that. And then mostly we'd be charging it at home. Unfortunately, if we decide to not get a Tesla, we probably won't be able to be as bold doing things like road trips. Because my mom is really good at just throwing some stuff in the Tesla, jumping on the road. She knows where her superchargers are. She knows how to get around. It's it's pretty solid. Like she's got her strategies really well honed. I don't think I could do that as easily in a Hyundai. Oh, and Enzro, absolutely. As a data geek, I have to say the death of EVs has been vastly overstated. Completely agree. Again, it's the perception of it. Stock prices are flipping out because of our feels. That's right. I've spent way too much on this sort of Musk adjacent story. The other one that I did want to just kind of quickly point out, because again, anytime there's like negative news about the current state of AI, I want to talk about it because I think AI is kind of stupid too. Um, we're gonna fire this one up too. This is actually published properly from CNN. This isn't just them ripping off Reuters. Uh, let me fire this up. Written up by Allison Morrow. Meta scrambles to delete its own AI accounts after backlash intensifies. The issue emerged last week when Connor Hayes, a vice president for Meta's generative AI, told the Financial Times that the company expects its homemade AI users to appear on its platforms in much the same way that human accounts do. Quote, they'll have bios and profile pictures and be able to generate and share content powered by AI on the platform. That's where we see all of this going. And we, ooh, excuse me, we found a couple obvious AI bot accounts where they would try to look like real people. Just an outright lie. Like one said, I'm a proud trans mom, something like that. And you're like, that's pretty disgusting. There's this awful idea of the impersonation of a real person and feeding this platform just awful gobs of slop. And that's what so much of Facebook has become. I I still operate a Facebook account just so I can keep my some gadget guy profile locked. And I have some recourse when stupid people try to impersonate. This doesn't happen very often, but it has happened enough that I hold on to my Facebook account. But anything that's shared there is just pure autopilot from other platforms that I take more seriously. It's like I publish a blog post, it gets auto posted to my some gadget guy Facebook. I don't interact on my personal Facebook at all. I really haven't logged into the personal side of it in years. I didn't even catch it on my birthday this last year, and I felt bad about that. But also, I kind of feel like I've said this enough that the people who really care to keep in contact with me and aren't just clicking happy birthday because they saw something pop up on their Facebook calendar for the day, I'm talking to those people directly in other ways, in other venues, and on other services. So when you do see someone's Facebook feed, it's full of garbage. There is so little quality content, quality interaction left on Facebook. Facebook has utterly destroyed what the core benefit of their platform represented. And now, to further increase engagement, it seems their next big plan is, well, we're not getting enough real human interactions now. So why don't we just have bots talking to other bots, AI interacting with people? And that totally couldn't blow up in our faces in any way, except that it totally did. And now Meta's AI team are looking at pulling the early entrance into into this project. I just can't understand how anyone thought that describing this process in the way that they did was a good idea. I feel like every single day we're seeing more and more evidence of how buffered a lot of these corporations are from their own end users. I don't want to like, oh, late stage capitalism, but they're so anxious about fulfilling the needs of their shareholders in making stock price go up that has become such a singular motivator of the company's behavior that they're now like two or three steps removed from all the people that use their products and services that are actually fulfilling the fiduciary responsibilities. Like we're the data and the advertising and the marketing and the money that actually impress the shareholders, but they're so far removed from really trying to address their user concerns that they seem to think stuff like this is a good idea. So I don't know. Is anyone really using AI in this kind of social media context? To me, and I would imagine that most of the people in this chat right now probably look at AI generated content as a means of shortcutting the busy work for what they're currently doing. Not, I need to fulfill some kind of artistic expression, and so I told an AI to make something whole for me. Instead, I think it's probably like, oh, I just hate writing the description for my YouTube videos. So I took my script and then some AI bot went and turned it into 3 sentences, and that's what I used as a summation. To me, that is like one of the only things in my brain, that is one of the only things that kind of makes sense for what you can use AI to help accomplish as a co-pilot. this podcast not sponsored by Microsoft. As a way to just kind of streamline the busy work. I'm willing to give it that because it's kind of terrible at doing anything else, any other heavy lifting, any other actual content creation. But if you were worried that your Facebook interactions were too valuable, like you were having too good of a time on Facebook, really interacting with other people on Facebook and having those meaningful exchanges of information and ideas, don't worry, because I'm sure in like another year, they're just going to come back to this idea where AI bots talk to the few people that still seem to engage on Facebook. I forget what podcast it was. Someone's going to have to kind of fill in the gaps for me here. But it was another one of these conversations talking about how AI trains on the information it gets. So if it starts getting really terrible information from people who do terrible things or who are terrible people, maybe they're, I don't want to get into too many specifics. That's not what the point of this is. In society, we used to kind of frown on certain depictions of really awful people. And those people have always existed. But they would pipe up, they'd be awful, and society would go, well, that's not who we really want to be. And that person would kind of skulk off. In an era of AI bots where someone isn't that tech savvy, but they can get themselves on Facebook to spout a whole bunch of terrible stuff on Facebook, instead of just facing some kind of woke negative backlash and getting canceled, which never really happens to people, it's not like they're ever really removed from these platforms. Instead, they can find these kinds of encouraging interactions with artificial chat participants, and that will potentially embolden positions and ideas and topics that we would normally find somewhat objectionable from a society level. That to me is a palpable concern in the way that we can spread misinformation. Now no one really believes anything is real. Someone shared it on the Discord for the New Year's celebrations, and I think it was in Hong Kong. Someone's going to have to remind me because I also know it's going to be buried too far deep for me to find quickly on the Discord. But it was this really cool drone display. These drones made it look like there was this like dragon flying through the sky, and there were these things that were dropping fireworks. So you'd see this like dropping firework explosion as opposed to the normal like firework goes up and explodes. It was really, really cool. It was prefaced by a conversation where people online didn't know if it was real. And that blows my mind. Here's this video. I saw this cool thing on TikTok, but I'm sharing it knowing other folks said it might not be real. And that's what we're creating. We've already had a hard enough time with people who are like flat earth theorists or ancient aliens theorists just agreeing on what reality is and being able to go outside and touch grass and say that's real. Now we can't even do that. In an era of AI slop constantly dominating our social media feeds, no one's going to trust what is real. Everyone's going to knee jerk to react to things that are absolutely fake. And our ability to engage in discourse is going to erode so quickly. And all the while, we just have a whole bunch of heads of like tech corporations going, oh, but the stock price is going up. When I put AI on a product, people seem to think it's pretty cool and our stock price goes up. I hate it so much. It's so dumb. All right, hold on. Let me take a drink of coffee. We've got a couple comments on this. There's a continuing conversation going on about EVs, and I would love to go back to that, but I know I won't be able to make this a 3-hour podcast today, so hold on one second. From Whale. I think when it comes to AI, LLMs are way too overrated compared to other uses. So yeah, language models I am not very impressed by. I don't feel like that is really anything that magical. It's like the evolution of word prediction on a phone keyboard, just run through a much larger processing data center. I would highly recommend anyone who's kind of curious about this stuff, because like the tech is cool, but it's just sort of the iterative evolution of something that we've already had for a really long time. It's not special. But to your point, Whale, there's like a little program you can run, GPT for all. And you can pick a couple different models, like free models. Like you can even get Meta's Llama if you want to see what Meta is doing in this space. And you plug it into a computer, and you'll see right away, even on a pretty decent laptop or desktop, something a little beefy. I was running it on a 12th gen Intel Core i7. Now, that's not the mostest powerful computer you can buy. That's overkill powerful for most consumers out there. You ask it a question, and you'll see word by word by word as it's unpacking all of these parameters to try and guess what might make sense next in this context. And it really takes a lot of the magic. Really, the only reason why we think this is special is because it's faster. It's faster when you get a massive server farm to pick the next word that arrives in this word salad response from a language model. The other things, like I always feel like the optical stuff is way more exciting. Subject detection, our ability to improve content creation tools, what Affinity is doing in their apps is really kind of neat when you look at using a low power MPU to do subject identification in a photo. Like that kind of stuff is awesome. Talking to a chatbot is not impressive at all, and it's so meaningless in interaction. From H2 Otaku, people and companies already produced crappy content all by themselves, from lazy content to stolen content like reaction videos, so I really don't want AI making it even worse. Agreed. All right. Oh, I actually do have a couple more stories. So I didn't fire this up. So I'm linking this in the show notes. Again, everything is going to be on somegadgetguy.com. You can click on all these links and stories. And the whole point isn't that you just hear me talk about something and then you get on with your life. This is one I hope you'll follow up on. Here, let me screen share this. This is coming directly from archive.org, the Internet Archive blog. Welcome to the public domain in 2025. Every year we add old artwork
to the public domain, and now we're getting into some really interesting territory. Things like Mickey Mouse are now, the original depictions of Mickey Mouse are now in the public domain, and newer items from Mickey Mouse are in the public domain, including Minnie Mouse. So that's kind of interesting, just as we see how media evolves over time. But we've got musical compositions like Singing in the Rain, Ain't Misbehaving, What Is This Thing Called Love, Bolero. We've got literature like, where is, The Wind in the Willows, Sound and the Fury, All Quiet on the Western Front, Farewell to Arms. We're getting into an era of media and intellectual property where these are still accessible works of art. A story, a film. Talking about the films that are entering the public domain, this is what's crazy to me. So there's Spite Marriage is a silent film directed by Buster Keaton. Okay, yeah, it was a long time ago. Silent film, sure. Charlie Chaplin. Oh yeah, it's public domain. Blackmail, directed by Alfred Hitchcock, is entering the public domain. Moving forward, we are going to start getting into eras of cinema where your ability just to own and legally acquire really good movies, they're just old. We're about to hit that window of film noir. In a couple years, those films are going to be entering the public domain. Music that, right now you go and you pull up like compositions from 1929, they're probably not going to sound great. You're not going to get a ton of audio fidelity on stuff like that. But again, the artwork, the literature, someone can now make a Wind in the Willows film that has entered the public domain, take that original story from 1929 and adapt it for a modern audience in animation or in live action. Do something interesting with it without having to go through the IP and the licensing and stuff like that too. And then for those of us who are kind of obnoxious collectors of all media, and I run a NAS that's just full of movies and DVD and CD rips and stuff like that, Blu-ray, I guess. Um, this is a really fun thing to tap into, to check out. And then also a lot of this is linked directly on archive.org. So when I say, here, let me screen share this back up. I just want to see. So here's Blackmail, directed by Alfred Hitchcock. I want to click on it. I have no idea. I think it should take me to, here's Blackmail, directed by Alfred Hitchcock, 1929. You just get it. I'm just kind of curious to see. So if I show all of these, it looks like it's some kind of MP4 file. Blackmail, 1929, MP4, 1.4 gig. So I would assume that this is a decently compressed DVD rip of an Alfred Hitchcock film. Legal. Go get it. Go get a copy of Blackmail from 1929. One of Alfred Hitchcock's earlier works. Was that not awesome? Again, so many fun things that we could do on the internet instead of talk about Elon Musk. Murder. Parenthetical, totally not an AI bot. You are doing great, Juan. This is a great topic. I just nuked 8 comments yesterday on somegadgetguy.com that were all just lazy link bait. The username is a link to some terrible website that's probably going to give you malware. But all of those comments like, you've really spelled out for me in detail why this is an important topic. Like, you're not a person. You're not. This is so lazy. Ugh. Aditya Anil, wake me up when All Star by Smash Mouth enters the public domain. I will put that on my calendar just for you, Aditya. Whatever happens in our lives, you're going to get some random email from, I don't know. You know what I should do? Because Aditya, you're younger than I am. I should totally schedule that in some kind of online service or cloud or on some something that can just run on its own and I don't have to worry about it. And I want to say it's roughly 60 years from now, something like that might be public domain. So 60 years from now, you just get this random message. I'll be dead. Just be like, hey, Aditya, if you get this email from me, I'm probably not alive, but you wanted to know an All-Star by Smash Mouth, and it's just gonna throw your day off, right? It's gonna tilt your worldview like 4 degrees, and you're gonna really struggle that day. But I'll have had a good chuckle about it. It's so wild. Simon says, Hypno, Popeye the Slayer is being made. These characters are getting into, are now able to get into the hands of filmmakers to do disruptive and satirical and subversive things with the memory and the nostalgia of a character like Popeye the Sailor Man. It already happened with like Winnie the Pooh. There was already something about Mickey, a depiction of Mickey Mouse that had fallen into the public domain. So this kind of stuff is healthy for a market to repurpose. We have a cultural memory of these characters and this art and this cinema and this music, and now we can do new things with it. We never really should have had this long of a wait. IP law has really done a disservice to that spread of information and that evolution of culture. But now we're getting into some really good stuff. As we get through the 30s, again, over the next 5 years, man, there's some good stuff that we're going to start getting able to play with. I just wanted to highlight this one real quick because I've been such a nut for heads-up displays. I don't have a lot of CES news to talk about this week because a lot of the initial announcements have been product segments that I don't cover a whole lot. Like there was one as a robot vacuum that has its own robot arm. So the vacuum kind of hoovers around on your rug, but then it comes up against a larger piece of garbage, and a little robot arm can pick up that piece of garbage and then drive it over to a special trash can. Stuff like that's pretty cool. Like an evolution of the robotics that can help us like clean and manage our homes. But that's not really stuff that I dig into or I cover. I've never really reviewed a robot vacuum. We don't have floor space to cover that. But I've been really interested in this company here. So this is Halliday, and Daniel Cooper wrote this up over at Engadget. And yes, the byline is it's a reference to Ready Player One. But this is a new type of display for smart glasses. Now, I've been through almost everything. I started with Google Glass, and that had a prism that floated out in front of your eye like a Borg implant. Then I went to the Focals by North, which had a projector that would beam into a tiny little lens insert. Then we did the frame. I have the frame right here, but I haven't charged them up in a couple weeks. And the frame have a built-in prism, which I think is just one of the most genius, low-cost solutions for this idea. And I don't think I look terrible in frame. They're not quite my jam, but there's this little prism built into the lens assembly, and it's a little distracting when you first put it on, and then you just kind of start seeing past it, and information can end up at eye level. But recently, I've been really excited about waveguide. So waveguide optics are what you see. There we go. Waveguide optics are what you see in the new Ray Neos. I don't like the new Ray Neos, but the tech is really good. And the ones that I've been wearing daily are the Event Realities. So I'm going to take these, put these on my face, pop these off, and already, yep, it's already reconnected to my phone. Steelers lose AFC North. Sports Illustrated headline. Then, come on, give me the next one. Challenges as Johnson reelected Speaker. Complete list of Golden Globe winners from the Associated Press. CBS News, Baltimore County Council to vote on interim executive on Tuesday, replacing Johnny Olszewski. I can't pronounce that name. Something about some of those like sort of Slavic origin ZS combinations that really make my mouth freak out. But waveguide has become, my opinion, one of the best ways for us to discreetly build optical information into a very sleek, slim pair of glasses. This is the future right here. This is all-day wearable, practical, Heads-up display, information at a glance. This is my dream. I just wish it could give us some basic replies to notifications. Otherwise, this would be perfect. So, Halliday is looking at doing something a little bit different. It's not waveguide. The thing with waveguide is you do have those panels, those little rectangles that show up. And I have noticed if I catch a notification while I'm in the middle of a conversation with someone and I turn just enough that they get refraction, they can see the light kind of angled out, they will see green floating across my eyes. So Halliday isn't doing any kind of lens or prism projection. Instead, what they've got is a projector, a little mini projector that floats over one eye that then kind of beams. As far as I'm reading this, I think it is that it beams into the eye of the wearer, making it invisible. They literally say it right here. The hardware is invisible to onlookers. So it is waveguide tech, but it's not the same kind of panel projection that we see from waveguide optics on things like Ray Neo and Evan Realities. And again, it's all to make a very discrete pair of glasses. It should look like a normal pair of glasses, and the way that it projects information should be accessible, but it should also be easy to look past. So even when I am getting these pop-ups and these notifications, I can choose to look through them. They don't dominate my field of view. They don't block or distract me. They're not in my way. This is the fundamental difference I feel between top-down augmented reality and bottom-up heads-up displays. Is because, like, Apple's take on this is really VR. You are completely enclosed. Your eyes and your ears and your brain are just completely enclosed by Apple tech, and look at how clever they are, and look at all the things that you can do and float and see out in space in front of you. The bottom-up approach is, here's a tiny little piece of information, and if it's relevant to you in this moment, you can focus on it, but you'll probably catch a bit of it and just get on with your day. You'll probably eject whatever pops up into your field of view like that, and the entertainment of this is so much more discrete and bite-sized. It doesn't take you out of what's happening around you, it minimizes that. I've started leaving the glasses on while I drive just because Google Maps will pop my next direction in the notifications. So instead of looking down at the little car console to see, where my next turn is going, I just get that little pop-up that says left turn in 2.3 miles. I'm not trying to focus on my tech information, but I just got a little a little snippet of relevant information to that context, which is less distracting than looking away from the road. Now, I still don't recommend people operate motor vehicles while getting tons of notifications and reading their news headlines and stuff like that. That is a terrible idea. But with purpose, we can start evolving the scenarios in which a heads-up display makes sense. Heads-up display makes a lot of sense in a car projected out in space, so it looks like it's information floating out in front of the vehicle, not information in the cabin of the vehicle. So I'll be really curious to see. I'm going to reach out to the folks at Halliday, see if we can talk about some coverage for that. Right now, I'm wrapping up another sort of diary entry. We just got another major update for the Evan Realities, and I'm going to post that over on the Patreon. And I feel getting out of CES and seeing a few of these other players in this space, there are several companies that are coming out with waveguide optic headsets. And I think the murmuring is probably correct, that at some point over 2025, we're probably going to see a future iteration of Ray-Bans that have some kind of optical component. So it won't just be cameras and glasses with speakers, it'll be information that can pop up in your field of view, and you optically interact with that information too. I think 2025 is going to be a really strong year for that practical demonstration of heads-up display. I feel that does augment your reality, but it's not this Terminator vision, RoboCop, rich AR that HoloLens was trying to do 10 years ago. It's going to be what just kind of blends into your day. The more this blends into your day, the better it is. The more you'll use it, the more you depend on it. When I leave the house, I hate not having my glasses on my face. I don't wear glasses for vision correction. I'm only just a touch farsighted. I'm good. I am wearing glasses on the daily now just because it prevents all of the interactions that I need to have with watches and phones, and it keeps me just up and looking up and interacting with other people. And when I get some kind of notification, I can choose to jump on it or I can choose to ignore it. So, Halliday was like one of the top CES announcements that I caught this year. I really feel it's important for us to acknowledge the work being done by some of these smaller companies. I really don't expect a little startup named after a Ready Player One reference to survive in the market. I think that the play here is if they can build a little buzz, if they can get some attention, maybe they'll eventually sell this division off to Meta or Amazon or Google or Microsoft. You know, just like my beloved Focals by North got bought by Google. That ultimately sucked. But along the way, we've seen each iteration of this idea get better and better and better. From Google Glass to Focals by North was just radical progress. It was so good in experience putting the focals on my face. From focals to Evan realities is wild. I went from something that like I could fatigue me wearing for like most of the day. The focals by North wore heavy on your nose. Now to something that is even more practical, optically better, easier for everyone to see because you couldn't share focals. Like I could put my focals on someone else's face and they couldn't see what I could see. So it just starts to sound like snake oil, like the Emperor's New Clothes kind of a thing. But I put the Evan realities on every single relative's face at Christmas. And my Aunt Debbie was actually the cutest one. So I'm putting it on all the cousins and everyone like looks up and they see the projection out like, oh, and they move and they see how the information follows. I would pull up mapping so they could see the wireframe grid of the map around their neighborhood. It was just, everyone had this kind of like, it was unique. Everyone had something that they reacted to, but everyone had a reaction. For some people, it was just notifications. For other people, it was like literally, oh, and I can see the time, but everyone had something that they were impressed about. And I put it on my Aunt Debbie's face, and she just started like, oh, have you seen this? Have you seen it? And she started like running around. Like I had to like follow her around the house as we were having this like family get together and stuff. It was wild seeing that she like she couldn't even like articulate what it was that was so impressive, but she was freaking out at how good the representation, this information is now just in space and I can always access it and it's floating and it's like magic. And I think if we could share more of those experiences with people, if there was a way to go to a Best Buy or a Target and have someone in a polo shirt say, would you like to see this? This is, this is a new type of wearable gadget and now look up. And that's literally all I do. So I put the glasses on their face and are they comfortable? And they're like, yeah, these feel like regular glasses. And okay, now look up. And at first people like just glance up with their eyes and like, no, tilt your head up. And then information. And you just see them like look at it. And you can see they're not contained. They're looking out and up at something floating in space in front of them. If you could do that, imagine the line, the first week that you had that at like a Best Buy. I even think like a Barnes & Noble could be kind of fun for these media and cinema glasses doing the same thing. But you go, people would line up for that. What's that guy doing? I don't know. He's looking up at something. Then you like, would you like to try? I just feel like we're missing out. Unfortunately, it won't take off until like Meta makes Ray-Bans, right? Facebook, Meta, Ray-Bans, those are brand names. So I guess we can take it seriously now. But instead, like, I've got the frames, I've got the Evan Realities, I want to reach out to Halliday. There are some industrial companies that have been in this space for a while and they're starting to make pivots into consumer solutions. You won't know any of those labels, but just think how cool it would be at, like, again, like a Best Buy. It's the right place for it. And like, oh, yeah, come check it out. Here, put them on your face. Now look up. Hands free. Oh, a DTNL. I really hope so. It was so heartwarming that, my aunt, who isn't really a techie, but she was the family photographer. She is one of the family photographers. Like, she flipped out so hard. And it was such a great, just primal, something just happened. What just happened? Oh, it's still happening kind of reaction. It's what I wish more people would just let themselves have fun with this stuff again. Aditya is saying we are all probably going to react a bit like Aunt Debbie when we first tried the new generation of heads-up displays. The bummer for the thing that's crushing my soul is that it is so difficult just to try. Hearing me talk about cinema glasses, face displays, heads-up displays, it's insufficient. Just hearing someone talk about it does not deliver the experience you would experience. Until you can just put something on your face and see what I've been talking about, it's kind of meaningless. So anyway, a company to keep an eye on. I really am anxious to see if their solution for uh, projecting information will arrive at even the next step of discretion, where the Evan realities are super discreet. People don't really seem to think anything's different until they catch just a bit of green. Once that green is in their field of view, they know that something is going on in my glasses and they can call me on it. But most people, like my Aunt Bree on the other side of the family, just likes that I have new frames. She thinks I just wear glasses to wear glasses. Like, I don't think she's clicked yet that the glasses that I'm wearing are smart glasses. And I'm not pointing this out to people. I want to see who catches it and who calls me on it. So if she catches this podcast, hey, Aunt Bree. DTNL. 7 reasons why you should wait for the eventual Apple heads-up display. The Verge, summer 2025. I'm calling it now. There are all those things. I still caught another round of Apple glasses rumors at the end of the year. 2025 is going to be the year Apple makes glasses. You're like, oh God. Given Apple 14 years of hype coverage on glasses, and there's still nothing to show for it. The other CES announcement that just got shared to the Discord, so I'm going to pop this into the show notes here real quick. Who shared it? Was it... I can't remember who shared it. Farhan shared this. Hey, Farhan. Let me screen share this. This is coming by way of Windows Central. Qualcomm's latest Snapdragon X shakes up the $600 Windows laptop market, brings AI to everyone. Here's why Intel should be worried. That is a lot of headline, but basically the good thing is that we're seeing a slightly, it's right here, literally in the sentence. The X1 26100 is a slightly toned down Snapdragon X Plus design with the same 8-core count, but maxes out at 3 gigahertz with no boost and 1.7 teraflop GPU. So this is a slightly tuned down Snapdragon X. It's an X Plus, not an X Elite. Has the same 45 top NPU, which I don't know. There's not a lot really taxing our NPUs right now. We're waiting for more developers to jump on getting a lot of this stuff out. But it's an 8-core CPU, and it's got a decent GPU. I would imagine that we're probably looking at about a 15% hit. If I'm just trying to do a little napkin math. Obviously, I haven't gotten to play with any of these yet. I would say about a 15% hit on the GPU. So this is not going to be a great gaming machine, just as the current Snapdragon X Elite is not a great gaming chip. You can play games on it, and the games play well. It's not going to be a gaming platform. But if we're seeing Qualcomm get their yields up, this tier of CPU performance is wild. Performance per watt is phenomenal. And so we're taking X plus, and it really sounds like the main difference is going to be just a slightly slower clock speed. Again, probably in the range of about 5% on some kind of synthetic benchmarking. No boost clock, so we won't get that surge of performance that we can kind of see in, like for example, if you do something like Handbrake and you do a CPU video encode in Handbrake, you don't do a GPU encode, you can see kind of a short term burst of higher performance on X Elite that then scales into a more reasonable sustained performance, right? So we know that a boost clock can help just nudge a short task a little faster, but in a more sustained task, you're probably not going to keep that peak performance for as long. So we're not going to get the benefits of that. We start selling mid-range laptops that are directly competing against the 5 and 7 series Intels, that sort of mid to upper mid AMD range. They're quieter, they get great battery life. Those are going to be monster systems for your daily driver, bread and butter. I just need a good laptop, and I want the battery to last, and I want to write on it and surf the web and watch a video. These things are killer on ARM. ARM chip is the way to go. And especially that class of consumer is likely not so heavily entrenched in how terrible Adobe is that they have to worry about, oh, but I only have emulated performance for this app. Ugh. So Farhan, thank you for sharing that on the private Discord, the Some Gadget Guy Patreon Discord. I'm going to be curious to see who's going to get some of these systems out first. Because again, this is the announcement. This is a new chip, or I should say a new tier of chip from Qualcomm, and now we need to see what partners pick up on this. We know Geekom is going to be making an X Elite desktop, one of their little mini PCs. So that's going to be a good Nook clone, and it should go decently well against, I would say, the last gen Mac Mini. So Mac Mini with M2, I would easily go X Elite over M2. X Elite versus M4 is a different kind of fight, but again, you'd want to factor in the price on RAM and storage and whether or not you cared about upgradability. I'm hoping that you can still crack open a Geekom and get to some of the bits and maybe, upgrade some components in that box, which you can't do anything on a Mac Mini. But now we're going to have another tier of good consumer performers. I just found it was my Huawei MateBook, and this was kind of fun. I did a bunch of videos on the MateBooks before Huawei was properly finally kicked out of like the United States and more Western markets. But I had this little Huawei MateBook, and I just kind of stored it for a while. And in my videos, I was showing like this is the lower model MateBook, and it's not built as well. It got dinged up really easily. I hated the USB-C port arrangement. One port was for charging, one port was for video out. You couldn't use hubs and docks with it. But I found it again recently, and I fired it up, and I was really stoked. It had an 8th gen Intel Core i7. 8th gen supports all of the updates for Windows 11. So this machine is getting pretty old. 8th gen Intel when we're going into, technically 16th gen Intel. I fire it up, I get all of the updates installed. The fan is cranking like crazy just installing Windows updates. It's the machine is running really hard. Get everything to settle down, and I now just have a current Windows machine that when I'm doing things like I wrote a script on it, I was streaming video on it, I wouldn't want to edit 4K video on it, but I could. It would be a really chuggy experience. It's capable of doing it. I had plenty of horsepower for editing, for image editing. Like I fired up GIMP and I fired up Affinity. Like this machine is getting on. We're closing in on 7 years, 8 years old, and it genuinely would still be accomplishing those things today. If that was like my work, I like to do a little photo editing. I like to, write and do spreadsheets and PowerPoint presentations. And I put together all this stuff for work and I have to work on documents. Like all of that would still be fine. And I don't know that it would be a radical, tangible difference going to a newer Core i7 style CPU today. Some things would be noticeably faster, but I think a lot of the things that people would point to would just be like, oh, I got to go from 16 gigs of RAM to 32, or I have a slightly faster SSD, so stuff kind of pops up a little quicker as it's loading. I think the biggie would be just whether or not the battery survived. If you just replace the battery, it'd probably be fine. So again, I'm never the guy to say, oh, performance doesn't matter. All computers are basically performant enough. But when you look at target of consumers and say, hey, your needs were well met 8 years ago, you will notice differences, but I don't think you're going to notice substantial differences. Now the big difference would be in a similarly configured machine, yeah, it's going to get a little quicker, but you're going to get radically better battery life and it's going to run quieter. Oh, that might be a reason to upgrade after 8 years of running an older, thin and light portable notebook. Now, I think there is a practical reason to consider shopping a $500 to $600 laptop, where that laptop was originally a $1,000 laptop. Now you could get not only similar performance, maybe better performance than an 8th gen Core i7, and it's going to have significantly better battery life than that Huawei ever had when it was brand new. And when the fans do kick on, they're so much quieter. You need so much less active cooling on that ARM chip. But to me, like the scale and the perspective on that is getting crazy, where genuinely I do feel consumers are holding on to these things not out of some like necessity. Oh, I just can't afford a new laptop right now. I think that's true for a lot of people. I'm not trying to diminish struggles out there in the market, and the stuff is getting more expensive, not less expensive. But that genuinely, if you use your laptop to write documents or edit spreadsheets, surf the web, and stream video, what what do you need a newer machine for? You genuinely don't. You don't until you've literally sucked all the life out of it and it's just not even worth paying for the battery replacement. And even then, I would argue most people will probably be better off just replacing the battery, getting the machine kind of cleaned up a little, and then it would be like brand new again. But it's just going to feel better to go out and buy the brand new machine. I feel like that's why so many people feel like their new purchase is underwhelming. They really weren't going to do anything new or different. So there's that dopamine hit of, I just spent a lot of money, here's the fresh, new, shiny thing. And then a week later, it's just kind of doing the same thing that I was always doing on the old one. Does it feel that much different? I mean, yeah, it's a little snappier, I guess. But they weren't inclined to really investigate anything else they could do instead. So, oh, Nick Fell. Absolutely. If you can upgrade RAM on some Windows on ARM machines, that would be a huge deal. So my guess, here's my hypothesis. The folks at Geekom reached out about reviewing a new box that they're going to be putting out. It's really not. I think they're getting a good deal on some older AMD chips. So they're coming out with a new revision to the mini PC that I think it's the 6800, the Ryzen 6800. So I might be playing with one of those in the next couple weeks. I don't know. I've really hit them up and said like, hey, I've done a lot of coverage on ARM and Silicon and stuff like that. So when you do have some availability for X Elite, please keep me in mind. My prediction is that in this frame, in this chassis, RAM will still be soldered to the main board. I bet you they're getting a Qualcomm built main board. But what I'll be curious to see is if there's any opportunity to add another SSD to that main board. So maybe you end up with an X Elite and they have 2 or 3 configurations, kind of like the laptops, where it's like maybe there's a 16 gig, 32, and a really expensive 64 gig, and they all seem to come with either 512 or 1 terabyte of storage. But then in the enclosure, we're able to add on those PCIe lanes, we're able to add another M.2. That to me would be a pretty solid setup. At least that one bit of upgradability above what you can do on a Mac Mini. Whether or not that makes the difference between you buying X Elite or an M4, that's on you. You really need to look at the performance and the GPUs, especially what kind of work you're trying to do on those machines. But I'll tell you, I've had nothing but awesome experiences on X Elite on my Windows Surface. My Surface Laptop 7 has been it is the best laptop I've ever owned and used. It's gorgeous. There's still so many things, like with the exception of just outright video rendering in DaVinci Resolve, I would probably be able to replace most of what I do on my massive workstation chassis here on my little Windows laptop, and then some. Like, it's just so much nicer to use. Anyway, I've gilded that lily in previous discussions. Simon says, Hypno says Apple might have ceased production of the Vision Pro. I posted on that on Threads and Mastodon. And just it seems like from component suppliers that Apple's strategy for mixed reality, it's so frustrating because I came out with videos saying like, hey, this is not a good launch. Right from the get-go, I said, hey, the way Apple is positioning this product is not the way to do it. And so many people took that to mean that I was just an Apple hater and that I was making the argument that Vision Pro was a terrible product. And that's not what my argument was. My argument was Apple's trying to make this look like it's consumer facing. They only should have called this a dev kit. Because that's what it is. It's a really expensive dev kit. Like HoloLens is a really expensive dev kit. Regular people can buy one, but it's not for that. Well, big surprise, it hasn't caught on. It is not a consumer-facing product. Developers are not interested in making apps for it. It's too expensive for the limited number of uses that it has. And even today, I'll put out and say like, hey, can we finally acknowledge that all of the people who were critical of Vision Pro were right? And then you get someone who's like, but I think it's a great product. And that's not the argument we're making. It's like, I just feel like the people who act like it shouldn't exist are incorrect and you want more competition. Well, now it seems Apple fans care about good competition in the market. Neat. But yeah, that was never the argument we were making. The argument wasn't, I don't think Vision Pro should exist. My argument was, Apple was stupid to try and position this as ready for consumers when there's so little you can do with it. The idea is not there. I think about every single time I tell a story about a family member or a friend experiencing one of my face displays. Look at your circles of family and friends. Who in your circles are really ready to strap computer to their face? I would have to imagine that number is exceedingly small. So Apple was incorrect. And if we don't point that out and we don't criticize both the sort of what the product can do and the positioning and marketing of the product, then we're lost. We'll never get good competition if Apple always seems to do the goodest thing because their marketing said so. If you can't say, hey, they did that poorly, then even Apple won't improve. Again, I feel like the C-suite at Apple is multiple layers buffered from consumers. But if they don't get some pushback and criticism, then they're going to keep doing dumb and terrible and awful things. You can't correct the company by always telling people that that company is good. You have to be able to say like, well, they really screwed the pooch on that one, guys. It's just kind of wild. Let me take a drink of coffee here. We're going to wrap this up. I have gone a little long and my voice is absolutely feeling it here. So 2 seconds. Okay. So folks, lots of tech news I'm sure that we're going to be seeing at a CES. I would wholeheartedly recommend that you be following the social media on people like TK Bay. TK is going to be out. I think he's already out in Vegas. I don't know actually, but he's going to be popping by CES. My buddies Snubs, Shannon Morse, and Trisha Hirschberger, they're going to be on the ground in CES, especially for security conversations and gaming conversations. Two of my favorite people on the planet. Lots of really fun people are going to be out there. I'm really sad that I'm not going to be able to join them in person again this year. It's just really tough. I've got to find a way to kind of get around the holidays and be rested to cover CES, because otherwise I get real cranky pants. But there's lots of fun news that's going to be coming out from the show floor. We're going to do a recap. I'm going to see if I can get TK to maybe join us next week so we can just chat out some of the experiences that he had out in Vegas this year. And then lots of stuff. Apparently there's some kind of announcement. I don't know what that announcement might be. But tomorrow is going to be a big launch day for a group of phone fans. I've got camera coverage coming up. I've got follow-ups. Like, I still haven't finished. Oh no, which phone? Which phone do I hold up that won't get me in trouble? Where did it go? Oh, is it over here? Yeah, so I still have the little brother. I'm wrapping up my look at the Vivo X200, not the X200 Pro. Little compare and contrast, and then I'm hopefully going to get this one out in the mail to another reviewer who I think you'll enjoy what she has to say about the Vivo, the X200 Pro. And then I'm also getting another video out soon. This is my OnePlus 12, and it's in a completely new case and enclosure, and I finally replaced that awful screen protector. It had gotten all gouged up. And I just felt it was a fun way to kind of remind people, like, taking care of what you got. So my OnePlus 12 now feels like a completely brand new device, and I spent $20, not $1,000. So I think it's fun, right? We all know you can clean up an old phone and kind of trick your brain into feeling like you got something new. But I think it's important to put that out there and actually talk about that stuff on the channel. So lots of stuff. I've got 6 videos in production right now, and we're gonna get back in gear. New year, new you, new me, new us, and we're gonna have some fun, really talking about some really cool stuff. Oh, JMan150, yeah, Tech Odyssey. I haven't caught up with him for a while. God, I miss my friends. Simon says, Hypno says, great show. I appreciate you dropping by, Simon. Malik, I can't wait to see the budget redacted phone review. DTNL, man, Juan, you got to work on that poker face. Like, you don't know which phones are being released tomorrow. Like, you don't have at least 2 of them in front of you right now. I have more than 2. So anyway, folks, have an awesome week. There's going to be some fun stuff to chat about this week. Catch all the streams. I hope other people are back in gear. I kind of unplugged. So I'm going to be lurking back again on, like a Gadget Goddess and Easy Computer Solutions, a tech preacher. Barry Johnson is going to be popping in on a bunch of streams and stuff. I really want to make sure I'm getting to chat with my pals again. So be on the lookout for some really fun conversations over the next couple days, and support those channels. Like, really make a point, show up, engage in the chat, ask those questions, reply to those comments. It really means a lot. And we're all so kind of burnt out from the holidays. Just getting that ball rolling again, getting back into the flow, getting back into the vibe. It's really great. I can't thank you enough, all the people here who have been jumping in on this chat. So I want you all to have an amazing week. I want you to do awesome with your technology. I want you to be awesome with your technology. And I will catch you back here next week for another episode of the Monday Morning Tech Chat Show on the SGGQA podcast channel. Be safe. Take care of yourself so you can keep taking care of others. I'll catch you back.